Howdy folks, Jabreaky here. British animation has a reputation for being charming, goofy and creative. From the adorable Shaun the Sheep to the colourful Gumball, but there's an underlooked side to my country's animation. British animation isn't all jolly tea and biscuits. Sometimes our cartoons can go to some dark places. That includes our feature-length animated films. So in this video I'm going to be counting down my picks for the top 10 darkest British animated movies. Oh, and just a heads up, I'm going to be including live action / animation hybrid movies. Let's begin. Chicken Run. Chicken Run follows a flock of chickens who are trying to escape their farm, with the brave and fearless Ginger leading the way. Every escape attempt they make is a bust though. To make matters worse, time is running out, because their farmers, Mr. and Mrs. Tweedy, are building a chicken pie machine. Luckily, the famous flying rooster Rocky crash lands into the farm, and agrees to teach these hens how to fly while his wing recovers. Yes, this film is a family-friendly comedy from the makers of Wallace and Gromit, but many folks don't know that when Aardman first started as a studio, they mainly produced strange and experimental shorts with dark overtones. That same gloomy melancholy is prevalent in Chicken Run, a film that shows the harsh brutality of chicken farming without holding back. On the surface, Chicken Run is a funny, talking animal comedy rooted in Yorkshire countryside charms.
Morning, Ginger. Back from holiday?
I wasn't on holiday, Babs. I was in solitary confinement.
Oh, it's nice to get a bit of time to yourself, isn't it?
But let's not forget that this is a movie about imprisoned characters trying to escape the threat of slaughter. The whole movie has this murky, bleak colour palette and an ever-constant feeling of hopelessness. No matter how often these chickens make us laugh, we can never shake off this sense of impending doom for every one of them. Not to mention, the movie is chock full of pure nightmare fuel that'll traumatise younger viewers. The farm's ferocious guard dogs that are waiting to capture escaping chickens, Edwina's gruesome execution scene that leaves a lot to our imagination, and a crazed Mrs. Tweedy who won't let her money pot chickens leave.
Put the ramp down. You are going to be a pie.
Sure, the pie making machine has its comedic moments, but dang does it get intense and strongly imply how violent each pie destined chicken's death will be. Yes, Chicken Run is certainly the least dark on my list, hence why it's all the way at number 10, but it still deserves to be on my countdown because it's such a melancholic and eerie depiction of chicken farm life. Alice. This live-action / stop-motion animation hybrid Alice in Wonderland movie was a creative collaboration between renowned Czech filmmaker Jan Švankmajer and British film studio Film 4. Švankmajer approached the classic Lewis Carroll story more like a dream than a straightforward adaptation. The finished result is this hypnotically bizarre version of the book that depicts Alice's Wonderland adventures like she's in a twisted nightmare. All the beats and characters are still here, but there's a stronger emphasis on dream logic. What makes it dark is how Wonderland is essentially this decrepit, rotting house, rather than a magical topsy-turvy land. It's this take on Wonderland that makes Alice's journey feel claustrophobic and stuffy. It's like she's being trapped in some creepy stranger's home. We never know what kind of thing will be behind each door either. Every turn of the corner is a new, unnerving surprise. Not a single character is designed to look cute or appealing either. The White Rabbit is a taxidermy bunny who escaped a glass cage, the Mad Hatter is a creepy marionette, the March Hare is a falling apart clockwork teddy who needs to be frequently rewound, and the Caterpillar is an old sock with false teeth. There's also countless scenes of Alice being tormented and abused by Wonderland creatures, from a rat starting a campfire on her head, to a bunch of animal skeletons trying to boil her in plastic. Oh, and this is one of the rare Alice in Wonderland films where we actually get to see characters have their heads cut off by the Queen. Heck, in one scene, the Hatter and the Hare get beheaded, only for them to casually wear each other's heads straight after. What the hell? Jan Švankmajer's Alice isn't just one of the darkest British animated films ever made, it's maybe the darkest Alice in Wonderland ever made. The House. This is a stop-motion animation anthology made up of 3 stories. Story 1 is about a working-class family giving up their home to live in a luxury mansion, only for the parents to become the furniture. Story 2 centers on a scatterbrained house developer trying to sell a house he built to pay back his bills, but but a family of vermin end up moving in for free. Lastly, story 3 is about a landlady trying desperately hard to get money from her tenants in a house that's situated in a flooding world. However, a spiritual guru comes into her life and turns the house into a boat. This is a very strange and odd Netflix movie that can be bewildering to follow, but that's the charm and appeal of it. It's a surreal, spellbinding film that doesn't hold your hand like you're a baby. You take what you want from it. It explores the very nature of a house, what a house means to a person, the way a house reflects its owner, and how a house can consume a person's life. There are running themes of materialism, luxury, and self-presentation throughout that tie every story into a neatly wrapped collection of weird adult fables. So why is it on this list? Well, these stories actually have some very nightmarish concepts that tap into our natural fears of body horror and home invasion. There are things in these shorts that will leave you nauseated and uncomfortable, especially if you have fears of house vermin.
Can we ask you some specific questions?
My favourite segment is the first story. There's something downright chilling about the liminal spaces of this cold, empty mansion. And the way these parents lose themselves in the luxury of their fancy new home.
You look foolish, both of you.
Mabel!
Why on earth would you say such a thing?
Only to mutate into the very fabrics that they obsessed over.
Mabel. My little girl.
Mama. Leave Mabel.
The reason that the film isn't that high on my countdown is because story 3 isn't actually that creepy. Heck, it leans way more to being a slice-of-life comedy than a horror short. This is intentional, of course, because our final story is designed to wrap the trilogy of tales up with an optimistic message of living life to your fullest. Look, the house isn't for everyone, and you might find it to be too strange, but it certainly grew on me once I better understood what it was going for. Renaissance. Renaissance is a motion capture collaboration project between studios from the UK, France, and Luxembourg. Set in a futuristic Paris, the film centers on Karis, a cop that's investigating the mysterious disappearance of scientist Ilona, who works for the megacorporation Avalon. With help from Ilona's sister Bislaine, Karis dives down a deep rabbit hole as he interviews a variety of shady suspects. I'll be completely frank, this is not a good movie, folks. Sure, it's an awesome film noir art style reminiscent of Sin City, but it's all style over substance. When you boil it down, it's just your generic detective thriller. From the grizzled detective who doesn't follow orders, to the femme fatale that seduces him. You name it, the cliche is here. Oh, and the film does nothing remarkable with its futuristic setting, it's mainly cosmetic. However, this film fits perfectly into this countdown, because Karis' investigation leads us down some disturbing paths. For example, Avalon's camouflaged assassins, who are out to murder each suspect or informant, are quite a violent force. There's definitely something creepy about being tracked down and murdered by invisible killers. We also find out that Avalon were tied to a project that experimented on kids with progeria, that resulted in the disclosed deaths of innocent kids. We don't see these tests in action, but knowing that these poor kids died in a science lab is horrifying. Karis later finds out that Ilona herself actually worked on this project, and she ended up discovering the secret to immortality. It then turns out that Ilona's colleague, Jonas Muller, had kidnapped her, because he was afraid what Avalon could do with the recipe for eternal life. There's certainly something dark about a megacorporation getting their hands on the cure to death. Imagine the power they would have, and the kind of monsters that they could hand immortality to for a high price. Heck, I'd say that the grimmest thing about this movie is how it shows the real horrors of living forever, and what such a freedom of power can do to a person.
Who do you think you are? The world is waiting for my discovery. It always has been.
Ilona, Avalon will turn your dream into a nightmare.
I can't exactly recommend Renaissance to people, because, well, it's mediocre at best. But it's still worth highlighting any animated movie that tries to be mature enough for adult audiences. Watership Down. Fiver the rabbit and his brother Hazel live peacefully in a warren together, but suddenly Fiver gets a vision of horror yet to come. So Fiver convinces Hazel and a few other bunnies to leave their home and find somewhere else to settle. After journeying far for ages, our heroes find a new burrow to live in. but they have no doughs to keep generations going. One day, Hazel learns of a cruel warren where rabbits are treated like prisoners and are punished for escaping. Said warren is commanded over by the tyrannical and evil General Woundwort. So Hazel leads his friends in a successful rescue mission, which deeply enrages the General, who sets out for revenge. Now, whenever someone mentions the topic of dark British animated films, this is maybe the first film that comes to people's minds. I totally understand why. It's very much a story of rabbit survival. The whole film has this mood of anxiety and trepidation, as our heroes cross landscapes and environments to find somewhere safe, in a world where bunnies are easy prey for countless predators. There are very harsh scenes in this film that show how unforgiving the food chain can really be. When the rabbits aren't dodging predatory animals, they're having to deal with humans, who are far more advanced at catching wildlife, and leave traps that are more barbaric than a fox's jaw or a bird's beak.
The peg's nearly through. How are you going? I can't feel him breathing.
Heck, even other rabbits can be creepy to be around. Like when we visit a cult-like rabbit warren, there's this unnerving feeling that they're being watched, but we have no idea why.
There's something unnatural and evil and twisted about this place. It feels like mist, like being deceived.
However, we all know the aspect of the film that traumatizes audiences the most: General Woundwort. This grotesque and aggressive villain is a bad-tempered brute who can't be reasoned with. He's renowned for being exceptionally violent towards other rabbits. But that's not enough drama for the audience, because then the film lets a dog rip apart Woundwort's men like ragdolls. Yeesh. People are quick to assume that this movie is just an adorable talking bunny film, but when you actually sit down to watch it, you'll realise that it's no squeaky clean Disney cartoon. You may be surprised that I've only ranked it at number 6, despite its reputation, and that's because, well, there are actually darker British animated movies than Watership Down. No, really, just keep watching if you dare. The Secret Adventures of Tom Thumb. In this surrealist take on the classic Tom Thumb fairy tale, a tiny thumb-sized boy is born to loving parents, but the government takes Tom away for science studies. Tom manages to escape with another captive, and joins a community of fellow thumb-sized people, led by Jack the Giant Killer, who sets out to destroy the laboratory with Tom. Do not expect this film to be a whimsical fairy tale story full of magic and wonder. It is not your usual Tom Thumb adaptation, leaning way more to being its own strange thing. What makes it dark? Bloody hell, where do I even begin? First of all, the film's setting is this very dystopian version of Britain. A bleak world where everyone is poor and starving, some people being so hungry that they're willing to eat insects. There's also something very horrifying about the laboratory itself. It's a science lab that treats its specimens with zero compassion, including Tom himself, with many experiments clearly suffering from being alive. Even when Tom escapes the lab, his new friend who helped him escape is brutally killed by his fellow tiny people out of fear. And the movie just moves on from this violent death like it didn't traumatize us. Not to mention, once Tom is taken from his parents, his mother suddenly passes away, leaving Tom's dad all alone, left to grieve for his wife and miss the son that he only had for a day. He spends all of his free time trying to distract himself from his pain by drinking alcohol and having meaningless sex with strangers, but these things don't help him recover. What's worse is that Tom's reunion with his dad is cut short, because he's tragically murdered by some scumbag. It's so sad. This guy was the last decent human being alive in this hellhole of a world, and he poofs out of the film without any dignity. One more thing that makes this film creepy is that all of the human characters were created through an animation technique called pixelation, a method that uses real people like stop motion puppets. It's a very cool style of animation that clearly took time and patience, but boy does it have this unsettling uncanny valley feel to it. The Secret Adventures of Tom Thumb is an uncompromising movie that doesn't hold the audience's hands or enchant us with fairy tale charms. I encourage folks to check out my video on it, because I go into way more detail about the film in that review. Animal Farm. Farmer Jones was once a successful businessman, but he became an abusive and lazy tyrant. He made the animals work all day and reap the benefits to himself. The animals eventually can't take it anymore and revolt against their farmer. After the animals take over the farm, they introduce rules of equality and safety, but the pigs begin indulging in the luxuries of the humans, while they make all the other animals slave all day. The animals fear fighting back though, because the pigs' leader, Napoleon, has trained orphan dogs to be his personal executioners. Based on a book by George Orwell, Animal Farm was the first ever feature-length British animated movie, but it had to be sponsored by the CIA to get finished. Many say that the story is an allegory of the Soviet Union. Sure, there are many eerie parallels, but not everything matches up. I'd say that Animal Farm is a metaphor for any political uprising that devolved into fascism, not just specifically the Soviet Empire.
The revolution is now complete. We have no more use for that song. Singing it is now forbidden, under penalty of death.
Despite looking like a children's movie, Animal Farm is actually a very traumatizing and soul-crushing film. There's something heavy and grim about watching cute farm animals becoming victims of a totalitarian state. They all live in fear, suffer from starvation, and are seen as slaves to the pigs.
Rations were shortened for the workers, but the pigs, by virtue of their brain work, were plentifully provided for.
There's also something unsettling about watching the pigs gradually becoming two-legged humanoids, each one falling to the temptations of power and greed. By the movie's end, they're basically warped caricatures of human dictators.
This will encourage you to make your lower animals work even harder and eat even less.
However, to me, the darkest thing about the movie has to be the death scenes. Sure, a lot of these murders are off-screen, but our imagination fills in the blanks, and we do actually hear the agonizing cries of these animals being executed. This movie adaptation does give us a somewhat happy ending, as the animals overthrow the pigs in another revolution, but a part of us is left wondering if this will just become one abusive cycle for this farm. Pink Floyd The Wall. This is a feature film adaptation of Pink Floyd's concept album The Wall, which was mostly written by the band's bassist Roger Waters, who loosely based the album's story on his own life. The movie chronicles the life of Pink, a rock star who has been broken and bruised by the world, and has built a wall around himself. It's a powerful movie that tells its story through a mix of live action, directed by Alan Parker, and animation by political cartoonist Gerald Scarfe. The Wall is an emotionally raw and angry film that explores an empty-shelled man's traumas, with each trauma making up the breaks in his wall. The film uses intense abstract visuals to dissect each of Pink's traumas, including the horrors of World War II, the loss of his soldier father, the overbearing protective nature of his dominating mother, the cruelty and stifling of 1950s British education, which moulded children into emotionally stunted gears in the industrial machine, a failing marriage caused by Pink's own emotional distance, and the corporate sleaziness of the music business. It's these complex themes that make The Wall such a dark movie. The movie stamps on all the eggshells in its way as it earnestly explores how the Second World War scarred the British Empire. Behind the patriotism and nostalgia was the destruction of land, loss of innocent lives, and damaged psyches.
Did you ever wonder why we had to run for shelter when the promise of a brave new world unfurled beneath the clear blue sky?
Pink's tragic downfall into hatred and nihilism comes from how the world stole from him, stifled him, and beat him. This path of destruction leads to him becoming a fascist tyrant who spreads xenophobia and violence across Thatcher's already oppressed Britain.
Are there any queers in the audience tonight? Get him up against the wall! Yes! No! There's one in the spotlight, he don't look right! Have him up against the wall!
Director Alan Parker melds all of the war's disturbing concepts together to deep dive into a traumatized man's personal nightmares and mental health decline, as he unapologetically exposes the warts and wounds of post-war Britain along the way, all while the genius Gerald Scarfe gives us bold, grotesque and visceral animated imagery, with each animated segment bluntly getting across the movie's themes and ideas. Watching Pink Floyd's The Wall is no picnic in the park. It's designed to discomfort and shock audiences, but it's worth a chance if you can stomach what it has to offer and can keep an open mind about unorthodox filmmaking. When the Wind Blows. Based on the graphic novel by Raymond Briggs, When the Wind Blows is about a British countryside elderly couple called Jim and Hilda Bloggs, who are living through the Cold War and end up being hit by a Russian missile, leaving their home obliterated. Sadly, the government has ill-prepared them, and they're left to fend for themselves while the radiation fallout slowly poisons them. Jim and Hilda are the sweetest old married couple you can imagine, and they're bound to remind you of your own grandparents.
Well, at least you won't be called up, James. You're far too old.
Oh, thank you, my beloved. I'm still 2 years younger than you.
Well, if the worst comes to the worst, we'll just have to roll up our sleeves.
We spend a lot of time with these two as we get to know their lives through their casual domestic discussions. They share nostalgic memories of World War II, make naive comments about their dire situation at hand, and try to keep entertained without technology.
Perhaps we'd better try storytelling. You tell me one.
No, I can't. I'd feel funny. You're not a baby?
Well, pretend I am.
Don't be silly.
Go on.
No. You tell me one.
This is why it's so devastating to watch their health slowly decay as the movie goes on. The more we bond with them, the harder it is to watch them basically dying in front of our very eyes. The movie develops this effectively apocalyptic atmosphere throughout. You really feel the isolation and emptiness of this nuclear-blasted countryside environment. This isn't some Hollywood zombie movie. It's the horrifying reality of nuclear war, with everything being punctuated by Roger Waters' chilling and blood-curdling music score.
It's raining. I'm going in.
Rain! Yes! We can save it.
Jim tries his best to assure his wife every step of the way, but we as an audience know that they were doomed from the start. Jim's support of his wife is one part romantic and one part deluded. It's so disheartening.
Oh, look! My hair's coming out.
Don't worry, dearest. Don't worry. Women don't go bald.
When the Wind Blows is subjecting us to all this old people torture for a reason though. You see, during the 80s Cold War, the British government handled warning the public about nuclear disaster very, very badly, misleading everyone and downplaying the seriousness of the threat. This film is based on a graphic novel by Raymond Briggs, who wrote the book in a protest towards the government and a way of warning the British public about the real serious dangers of radioactive bombs and their fallout. It's one of the hardest animated movies you'll ever sit through, but its political message about government responsibility still remains timeless to this day. You'll leave the movie feeling drained and defeated, yet also angry at authorities who fail society in scary times. The Plague Dogs. Dogs Ralph and Snitter are the unfortunate test subjects of an animal research lab in the north of England. One day they manage to escape the scientists, but struggle to survive in the wild. Luckily, they do get some hunting tips from a sly fox called the Todd. Unfortunately, the dogs don't follow the Todd's advice properly, and they catch the attention of humans. Once the media gets wind that there's a pair of lab-escaped dogs who are killing livestock, rumours are spread that Snitter and Ralph have been injected with the bubonic plague, so authorities are ordered to kill them for public safety. This film is based on a book by Richard Adams, author of Watership Down. Much like Watership, this is a film about animal survival, but this time, the animals are deeply, deeply disadvantaged, because neither of them have wild instincts. Sure, Todd can help, but the dogs have a very passive-aggressive on and off again relationship with the fox, and the Todd will often bail on them when things get rough. To make matters worse, Ralph and Snitter are up against the British military. It's so saddening and maddening how cruel and relentless humanity has been to these poor animals. Heck, before Snitter even became a test subject at the lab, he accidentally got his master killed, and has been ridden with guilt ever since. To make matters worse, the same thing happens again while Snitter is on the run, when he unintentionally shoots a friendly human calling him over. Will this sweet pup ever catch a break?
Come on then. Oh, yes, that's it. Come on. Come on. That's it. Oh, come on, up we go.
Oh, and don't get me started on the director's cut of the film. There's a scene where the Todd knocks a hired hunter down a cliff, and it's implied that the dogs ate his carcass in starvation. However, the thing that makes this film truly dark, and what has disturbed people the most, has to be the animal testing scenes. These sequences are unbearable to watch, and they're the first scenes in the movie. By the movie's end, Ralph and Snitter try swimming away from the army in hopes of finding an island to live in peace on, but it's left ambiguous whether they made it. The Plague Dogs is a film that takes two cuddly doggos and drags them through the worst of the worst that our world has to offer, as they try to survive in the outdoors without any natural instincts, all while most of humanity either treats them as evil threats or disposable objects. This is why I think it's the darkest animated movie that Britain has ever made. So which do you think is the darkest British animated movie ever made? Let everyone know in the comments below. Don't forget to also like, share and subscribe. I hope you enjoyed the countdown. Cheerio folks.